So Chris, this week we are back. A little bit of a disruption last week. I was a little bit spewy and I didn't feel like recording. I tried, but I was worried I would, like kind of vomit on camera.
That's all right. We just gave the AI companies time to catch up with their releases and announcements.
Yeah, we asked for a 6-month hiatus on news, but unfortunately we didn't get it. What was announced, though, this week was Gemini 2 Flash Experimental. Yes, that is the name, Gemini 2 Flash Experimental. Not to be confused with Gemini 1.5 Flash Experimental or Gemini 2 Pro Experimental either.
Or Gemini Flash Experimental Thinking as well.
Yeah, and Gemini 2 Flash Experimental Thinking 1.02356 version 12, just to be clear. But it turns out Google, they've done something really, really good. This model is, I think, everyone says mind blown, and what's the other crazy word they go on about with? Is it
game changing?
Game changing, mind blown,
paradigm shifting,
all the ridiculous sort of clickbait titles are actually, I think, worthy of this model. So what's so good about this model? Well, it's still Gemini 2 Flash under the hood, which on its own is a pretty good model, but now they have this true native image generation and editing. And this is where the model actually can respond with both text and image. So not just text, but it's actually outputting natively images as well. So we have put this in Sim Theory and we've been having so much fun with it. It has truly impacted our productivity.
I've been looking for something like this since all the AI stuff began, before the start of this podcast. There were models on Hugging Face that would be, put this image in and then you can say what you want to do to the image and then it'll do it. And it seems to be like a very low success rate. In fact, I spent a good couple of hours this week integrating PhotoMaker, which is actually the best model I've found over the last few years for doing this, and it's actually decent, and we will add it to Sim Theory soon. But then you mentioned this one, and I tried it, and the aha moment for me was when I took a picture of you holding two dogs, Taylor Swift, and I said, put these together, not thinking anything major would happen. And then the resultant image was you and Taylor Swift each holding one of the dogs. And I was like, that is magic. It just blew my mind.
For those watching, I'm going to have to find that image now. I didn't actually pre-prepare it stupidly, but it is like, it's truly mind-blowing. I was able to do something similar, and this is one I'm able to find a bit quicker, which is to have a photo of, I got a photo of Taylor Swift and a photo of Ed Sheeran. As many people will know, Ed Sheeran's obviously endorsed the show and leaked a live recording of some interactions he had with Taylor Swift at one point in the show's history. But I was able to put them together with a moustache, which was pretty cool. And now I can't actually get the link up on screen, but I'll get it up later. And yeah, it's truly nuts to just bring up some proof point for people. And I know many of you listen, so I'm gonna have to do my best to describe it. But I took a thumbnail from a previous show, our brilliant thumbnail design, of course, and then I asked it, make the host on the left's hair blonde, because someone in our Discord community actually did this to me. They made my hair blonde, and I said when we got to 10,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed, I would actually bleach my hair and stylize my hair this particular way. So I asked it, make the host on the left's hair blonde with a modern hairstyle. And it shaved the sort of sides of my head and put a beautiful sort of blonde raised, I don't know if you call it a mohawk, but I'm not sure what it is. But it's super realistic. Like, it's a total perfect edit. It shows and demonstrates really good understanding of like what's going on in the image and what change you want. And then the next thing I did was I said, put a gold chain, not like my silver Dario chain that I wear all the time now. Put a gold chain on the left host. It should be big and realistic. And apart from ruining my teeth and pixelating the image quite a bit, I do indeed now have a gold, like a giant gold chain on, and my hair is blonde. I guess this is one of the limitations of it. The images do degrade after a number of different edits.
Yeah, that's true. But just the ability for it to, even let's say just on the first shot, take elements from different images and have them maintained in their original form. Like that photo of you and the dogs are perfect. I would recognize them if I just saw that image just randomly, but it split them apart. They're in completely different poses in the photo. I even took one of those OpenAI conferences, where they've got the diverse group of people announcing the thing. And I said, put these people in this jungle scene. I had like a crocodile and a toy boat on a river, and it put them all in different parts of the image with different poses and everything. Like, so it's not just like copy pasting like a, segment anywhere style thing and just putting them there. It's able to understand the thing that it's doing. Like, what about the one I did with you where you're holding the two dogs and I made it two cats, and it's just perfect. Like, it's just astonishing how well it was able to do that. Like the ability for it to maintain the character of what it's doing is just remarkable.
Like, I've got it up on screen now. I finally found it. So, okay, let's look at the original photo and then Taylor Swift accepting an award at an award show. And then you said, can you make a photo with these two people standing side by side? And it does sort of stuff up my face a fair bit, but ultimately you can imagine this improving over time. Like, it's the first interaction with a model where I've felt full Minority Report, where you're just barking orders and it's understanding it and delivering a result that you just expect. And then you said, this is the one where you said, like, I guess turn on the side and look at each other or whatever your prompt was. And now I'm looking at Taylor Swift. She's now holding my dog Taco. I'm holding my other dog. So it's taken one of the dogs out of my hand in the photo, put it with her under her arm realistically. I mean, this is AGI. It's here.
I just sent you another one of the original cat image I did, and it's got like, those cats aren't as good in the one you're showing there. There was actually a better one that I sent you on Discord, and like the cat's paws are like draped. That's it. They're like draped over your hand, and your hands are still rendered perfectly. Like, this is not like a hacky copy paste job. Like, it looks like you're holding two cats. And the quality isn't degraded at all in that image.
Some of the result, I think, are just in, like, I don't want to say insane to sound like a true AI influencer, but they are insane because it looks totally real. Like, that photo looks like it happened and I was holding two cats instead of dogs. Like,
and as you mentioned, the other thing that's amazing is multiple iterations. Like, I made a scene of an empty kitchen, then I'm like, add a cat, add a mouse, add a dog, and then add a caption. And it was able to do it, maintaining the scene the whole time and progressively enhance that image. The other thing you have the ability to do in Sim Theory is you can obviously screen share, you can add images in, you can generate images using like Ideogram or Flux, or now Imagen 2, which is Google's actual underlying image model that's doing this. And you can generate those images and then modify them or combine them with other images. So you had me earlier do an example where it's like, make a picture of a man, make a picture of a woman, now put them together. And it's perfectly able to do that. So it's not just like images it makes itself. It's like any image it can take and do this to, like, or 10 of them. Like, there's no limit on how many you can put in. You can put a whole bunch in and ask it to do stuff. And from what I've seen so far, it copes with it really well.
Do you know one problem it solves as well? And I think you struggle from this problem. We know that because, you have no imagination or whatever that fault is with you.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, so I struggle from imagination when imagining things like, if someone's like, oh, you should put a pool here, or you should like do this or that. I've always struggled with like imagining what the end result would look like. And so I found a photo of a house, Australia's favorite hobby, of on a real estate website, just the backyard, because I didn't want to dox myself too hard. And so I found a house, and I've got the backyard image. I dragged that in, and I said, show me what a modern pool would look like in this backyard. Check this out. Like, you don't even have to imagine. Like, I know there's been dedicated apps for this, but just to have this natively in a model where I can say...
Yeah, with no training, no, like, it's not an expert in pools or backyards or anything like that. And it's able to do that while maintaining the background. I mean, the thing is, we speculated about these kinds of products right when these image models first came out. And the image to image stuff has always been so disappointing. I was actually embarrassed by the offerings we have in sim theory around it, because you really get such a low strike rate with it. It's just barely even worth using. Whereas this one not only works, it's actually pretty fast as well.
The other thing I think is really interesting is, like, as long-time listeners of the show would recall, like, one of the early use cases I talked about was writing my kids customized stories, which I still do some nights. And you'd have to have, in the first version of Sim Theory, you'd have instruction following, right? Where you'd be like, write the story, then create an image based on the story. And it would do that and you would get the result. It took a lot longer back then. But now with this new Gemini model, you can literally just say, like, write the Batman story and then add some images throughout the story to narrate the story. And it has things like character consistency really well. It's just so impressive. Like, it's truly nuts how good it's gotten, to the point I can now write a story for my kids and have images intermixed through with the same character perfectly organized through it.
Yeah, something other models really struggled with. Again, there were a few like custom models that would do that kind of thing, but very hard to get running, very hard to get consistently, or the image quality suffered. I just sent you another one, which is our unofficial and unpaid sponsor, NordVPN. And I made an image of a bird. I asked it to add a top hat. Then I asked it to add NordVPN to it. But what's remarkable is, like, iteratively working on an image like that. Like, it's just absolutely crazy. You can ask it to do anything. Like, you could say now, change the background color, change the bird to be a fish, like, and all of those things actually work. Like, this is what people expect when they work with an AI image model. But as like, unless I'm mistaken, this is not only the first one to be able to do it, it's astonishingly good at it. Like, I am actually blown away by this. And to be honest, I haven't even had time to play with it properly yet. I'm excited.
Yeah, and the one thing I love about it too is that you can, like, you use your voice, and this is where I found it so futuristic. So you'll be like, turn on voice. I just was doing like a push to talk mode and say, make an image of a bird, put a top hat on the bird, add NordVPN text. And the model is astonishingly fast as well. So, like, you're not waiting very long. It's the first interaction with an AI I've had recently where I've been like, wow, this is a taste. This is a taste of the future.
Yeah. And I think partly its image understanding is very good as well. Like, to be able to do that, it needs to understand the image really well. And so far, that's been excellent from what I've tried.
So look at this example. So I used Imagen 3, which is also now available in Sim Theory. So I created an image saying jungle background image soft focus. So it came up with I think a really nice background image. And then I dragged and dropped in that same photo of us, like our sort of YouTube thumbnail. And I said, put these two hosts in the jungle. And okay, I look a bit weird. You look yourself. It made me look a bit Brian Johnson-y, I would say, with this silver necklace. If I had to
live forever. Good.
But yeah, but like, it put me in the background beautifully. Like, even just to remove backgrounds, this is like now.
Yeah, like, think of all those products that are just going to disappear because this will just be available. Not to mention, just think about how useful this would be in the workplace. Like, you're building a presentation, you're building a brochure for your company, and you can just take pictures of, say, your employees and say, make them look like they're working hard at a desk, or, put them in this, we're about to go on a holiday junket, show them, on the streets of Korea or something like that. And it'll work. Like, the creative potential of this is absolutely enormous. Not to mention, it seems to do text really well as well. Something until really we got the latest Flux and Ideogram, other models struggle with too. It doesn't have a problem with that. Like, I really think the potential here is huge. And then the other thing you pointed out to me is when you look at Google's models and their API. So Google also, just by the way, upgraded their SDK as well to be a totally new one. So in Sim Theory, we've completely replaced it, so it's all on the latest. But it also has output types for things like tool calling, code execution, video frames, audio frames, things like that. So when they say multimodal, they really mean multimodal. Like, it's going to be able to output anything it needs to get the job done as part of its response, as well as taking all of those things as input as well. And then I start to think about things like screen sharing and things like that. And we're going to get much, much closer to like real time. If it can modify an image like this, that means it can modify an augmented reality view as well. And we all know that these things get faster and more efficient with time, which means I really feel like we're not terribly far away where we can put on some augmented reality glasses and start to have the world around us augmented or changed. Like you could literally edit. I mean, this could be dangerous. Edit what you see as you're moving around in the world.
Yeah, I mean, they have some of these like visualizations at the moment, I know, with some of the headsets where you can just change the environment you're in and it can sort of somewhat map it. But yeah, you could really like put on a headset and say like, remove this wall and show me what it looks like.
Make everyone more attractive. Like I'm sick of seeing ugly people everywhere.
Attractive
Make them better.
goggles. But check this out. So here's another example of a real world use case. So it's a photo of a house and like some walls and doors and stuff, right? And then I said, show me what would happen if I paint my walls a muted blue color.
Wow.
Now, okay, it's like not perfect, but I'm sure you could upload the color swatch that you're thinking about painting your wall, right, in your house.
Yeah.
So you just take a photo, say, show me, like help me visualize what it would look like. And this is where I actually think.
Now turn it into a grisly murder scene.
Hey, I'm not finished yet. But here's the piece that's interesting. So let's talk about what we're seeing for those listening. So there's a light shadow from another room on this wall. It's maintained. So it's not like one of those crude paint mock-ups where it doesn't maintain the lighting. The lighting is perfectly maintained. And then so secondly here, then I asked it, put a picture of a dragon on a wall. Now this looks totally fake and unrealistic, but had I done like text or like some sort of like wallpaper, I'm sure it would have nailed it. And if I gave it another image of like a swatch of something from like a catalog, say I like there was some wallpaper I was interested in seeing what it would look like on the wall, right? It would have done that true to life for sure, like just from what I've experienced in the model so far. So there's some really practical use cases in everyday day-to-day.
Imagine how easy it would be to make new Where's Wally books now. You could just like get like complicated photos from real life and say put Wally somewhere.
Yeah, like you could
That's
make your own book in like 2
this.
minutes. Where's Waldo book?
Take this household plant and put it somewhere in this jungle scene.
So, look, I think it's going to make sense. It's pretty obvious where Google will hopefully go with this. I'm assuming on their Android apps or the next Google I/O, like this is going to be a thing, right? Where you can hold up your camera and be like, change the wall color to whatever. And if it's not, like, Google.
It's an incredibly understated release for how good it is. Like, you know, I actually was integrating this because you're just like, oh, there's a new Google thing out. And then I noticed the new API. So I just started diligently putting it in. And then it wasn't until I started doing like my ridiculous testing where I was like, what in the, like, I was genuinely just astonished it did it. I was like, I asked it that, not expecting that to work at all, and it did. And I was just like, wow, this is just amazing. And they're just like, oh yeah, it's just an experimental thing we're trying. It's like happens to be the best image model by miles.
They didn't march out their gaggle of nerds into this sort of usual setup we're used to now, where they march out their nerds and they're like, explain this poorly.
The only thing I will say is it is incredibly safety conscious. Like I said to it, can you please have a picture of you, Mike Sharkey, and Taylor Swift? So I put those two images in, holding up the World Cup together, right? Like I thought that'd look really cool. And it's like, this is unethical. This is deeply unethical, not just a little bit, deeply unethical, because neither of these people actually won the World Cup. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, does that really matter? And then the other thing it's incredibly sensitive on, and this one's probably a little more understandable, is children.
Yeah.
If you have a child of any kind in any photo, it will not produce output. Like even if like I had cartoon, like almost like a cartoon silhouette of a child reading a book I tried to use. I mean, I have kids, so I have a lot of images of kids and kid-related things. Just straight up, it will not answer, which is kind of annoying because there's like some situations where, there's just simply a child in there. But I took things like, I had an image of Anne Frank, right? So I guess maybe she's old enough to be considered not a child anymore in the image. And I got it to put her in an Iron Man suit. and you should see the thing. It's like it's uncanny the way it's able to do it.
So this is the thing, right, with the children thing. Like, you know, I maybe get why they're doing it. I'm not entirely sure. Like, it's pretty frustrating because my kids were literally, when they saw this morning, there's my literally for you, saw this and immediately wanted to get dressed up in like different hero costumes, like show me like I'm dressed up as Batman or whatever. And I couldn't do it. And I'm like, is this really necessary? Like, I look at Grok 3, right? No safety limitation. Like, they just do not care. Has the world ended? Has anyone built a nuclear bomb or like some sort of biohazard? No. They haven't. Like, so I understand the child protection stuff and I'm all for it because there's a lot of scary freaks out there. But I don't know. There's got to be a better balance. Like, I asked it to put a fence around a pool and some people swimming in that pool in that like sort of real estate-y shot I did. And it's like, same thing. You just get lectured.
Like, oh, is that gate certified to ISO 301? Because if not, I'm not going to be able to make the image. Listen to this one. I'm sorry, but I cannot fulfill that request. Adding a panda to an image of Vietnam would be factually incorrect and wouldn't represent the country accurately. Pandas are native to China and are not found in Japan. And I'm like, but hang on a sec. Aren't Vietnam and China connected? What if the panda just went on a long walk? Like, it doesn't.
What
it
if
doesn't
it's
make
a story, like creative writing?
Yeah, it just seems so like a bit like misguided. It's like you're not really helping anyone by having that limit. I'll tell you one that doesn't have limitations is PhotoMaker. I was making some really, really not safe for work images of Queen Elizabeth II the other day, and I'm telling you, there's no limitations.
No one wants to see these. No one wants to see these. All right, so
Google would hate them.
Moving on. One last thing I'll talk about is this idea or this like something that hits you hard when you. So I shared my screen. I actually shared the projection before we started recording in this session. And I said to the model, show me what you see now. Because obviously I'm sharing my screen, which is like a projector view of us getting ready to record. And it spits back an image, which obviously just looks like a screenshot of the screenshot I'm sharing with it in order to do this. And I understand some people might be skeptical out there saying, well, you know, if it can add a moustache to an image you upload, well, why couldn't it do this in the first place? And you're right. But what's creepy about it is you actually get this feeling that the model has eyes, like a human, like you're sort of seeing what it's seeing. And I don't think I'm articulating the feeling you get from doing it, but like, you're like, oh, so this is what it sees. Like, this is its vision. And
you just reminded me, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to use your classic image of the car in Newcastle and see like if it knows where it is. And then you could be like, okay, if I hit the accelerator, show me the resulting scene. It's probably going to be like car accidents are unethical or whatever, but it would still be very interesting to see. Maybe we'll do that for next week.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're like really frustrated because you obviously can't see any of the things we have up on the screen, I would encourage you to check this model out. I think you can use it for free on Google AI Studio if you have an account. On SimTheory, we've got it in, and there's a few more features, obviously, so you can use it with screen sharing and drag and drop images and create images with like Flux and then modify them, which I think adds a certain appeal, especially around marketing images if you like a certain tune of an image generation model. But yeah, check it out. We rarely, I feel like we rarely get excited. We generally talk a lot of things on the show, but this is cool and worth playing around with.
And so if you do access it in SimTheory, it's called Gemini 2.0 Flash Experimental. It's the one with the white icon. It sort of makes it a bit easier to identify.
So the other thing, I'll just point out some examples from around the on X. So one of these examples was this sort of pixelated image look. So stylistically, it can hold styles really well as well. So this person said, using the same style as this image, generate an image of a dog. So it's like a pixelated computer black and white image, and then it generates a similar image. So even just for game developers, I was thinking like even in Create with Code mode, if you're making a game, right, you could create sprites based on a certain sprite. So you could upload a sprite and be like, create a whole set of sprites for this game.
And I saw you showed one, didn't you, where it was a set of sprites and someone said, make a scene from this game. And it made a perfectly rendered scene from like an isometric style game.
Yeah, and I'll zoom in a bit because it's kind of hard to see.
The other example you showed me late last night that was really exciting was you took a black and white image and then said, colorize this. And it looks so good.
Yeah, I should actually bring that up for those.
Like, just think about that for people who have a whole bunch of black and white photos at home. They could now literally drag and drop them in and go colorize these and just see colored versions of their photos.
I forgot to show you this. So this is some old house actually in Sydney. And it's like full black and white, full pixelated. And I'm like, colorize this image. I think it did a pretty good rendering, right? Like that looks very realistic. Well, not, realistic for coloring that photo of the time, right? Then I'm like, put a woman of the period on the driveway walking up towards the house. This wasn't so good. She looks a bit scary because it degrades pretty quick. Then I'm like, put a flying saucer alien spacecraft in the sky. And now there's an alien spacecraft over the house. I said barely noticeable. It's pretty noticeable. But then further, I said, put a horse and cart in the driveway to the right of the woman, and bam. Like, look at this. When I switch, bam, bam. Yeah, very cool.
It looks like CGI effects from like 1990s movies.
It's good that 90% of our listeners listen to this podcast, this episode. They're just going to be like, what are these guys
We should just sit and watch videos. Oh, that's hilarious.
So the other examples I'll quickly go through. So someone said, generate an image of a cat drawing on a blackboard with the text, Gemini 2 Flash multimodal is out. And it's just incredible at text, positioning, shadows, everything like that. There's a few others.
Like I bet your example before with the paint swatch color on the wall with the lighting, I bet you could say, put graffiti on the wall or something like that. And we'll be able to do it and maintain the lighting.
Yeah. Oh, it would for sure. There's no way it wouldn't. This was the one around the game sprite. So yeah, he uploaded. It was actually the inverse of what you said. So it was draw Stardew Valley Farm. So it created like a screenshot of it. Now split this into separate components for a sprite sheet, and it just built a sprite sheet. So it visualized the game, then built a sprite sheet, and then the other one was the inverse of that. Gave it a sprite sheet and said, make a level.
Imagine
cool.
bringing this to Create with Code. We really should think that through. Like that would be actually amazing if you could be generating assets using this and maintaining the consistency. Because that's been the issue previously with that kind of thing. Like you're trying to go for a particular aesthetic or maintain something as you work through it. And then you lose that because each generation is like fresh thing. Whereas with this, you can seed it with the previous image and go, I need another sprite to do this and so forth. That's really, really exciting.
So one company during the week did march out their gaggle of nerds to present yet their latest developer tools. And this was also a super exciting announcement. It somewhat slipped under the radar because of this like Manus propaganda, which we'll get to in a minute. And I shouldn't say propaganda, but I think everyone sort of freaks out if anything Chinese gets released at the moment. But anyway, so OpenAI announced new tools for building agents, and it was a developer-focused event around literally what they say, tools for building agents. And there was a few announcements mixed in. There was the responses API, which we'll go through in a moment, web search, file search, computer use, which we are super excited about, Agents SDK, and then some observation tools to help with the workflow and execution of agents. Now, I think a few things I'll call out before we get into it. We're very excited about the computer use API and intend to bring it back into Sim Theory with that model because it's far superior than anything we've seen in the past. The other thing is that I think is super interesting is just where the market's going right now with this stuff. So the Agent SDK and this tooling around agents does feel to me like OpenAI is on the right track. I think this is a very strategically important release for them. They are somewhat positioning themselves as the sort of iOS for agents by releasing this tool set. And I think it's really important because what it's going to do for developers and people thinking about building agents is give them these foundations to to build the agents very quickly, deploy them, test them, productize them, see if they work. And it just drives more and more people into their platform. I would, though, like to discuss and get your opinion on, do you really want to lock yourself into some sort of agents SDK ecosystem with OpenAI if you're building a proprietary sort of focused agent right now? Like maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm not sure.
It's a tricky one because I agree. I think this announcement, while not as flashy as others, is actually very meaningful from the dev perspective. Like I admittedly haven't tried it yet, but looking at their API documentation, there's a lot of things in there I really want to get onto. So for example, their files API being, instead of like right now, if you were doing retrieval augmented generation with OpenAI, you'd maintain your own vector database, even if you're using their embeddings to do it, and then you send that data off to OpenAI you send the summaries of the text off to OpenAI in a normal request. Now instead you can provide the files to them and they maintain the vector database, and then it's simply a tool call to say, I want grounding on this knowledge when I do this request, which is far better because it's not a two-step process anymore. You don't need to have that first step and then the second step, which is their thing. Secondly, their system is able to make the judgment on which files are important to the query and how to balance those. And I just defer to them on that kind of stuff. They're the experts on this. So something like that alone is really good. The web search grounding is really good. Being able to choose when to have that involved in a query, for example, is really powerful. And then obviously the computer use I'm excited about as well. So I think they've also got knowledge and memory built in as well now. So all of these things that previously us devs were sort of maintaining and doing on our own in our own way, now being part of an official API, I think is better. And you say vendor lock-in, I do agree that could be a problem, but the other vendors have similar things too. Like Anthropic supports a files API. Google definitely supports a files API. They were the first ones to do it. And we're also seeing different kinds of tool calling and multimodal output from each of the models now.
Yeah, I guess if you compare it to Anthropic, they already have computer use. They have a better coding model right now, which is probably better for most of the agents. And nearly every agent we've seen, again, we'll get to Manus in a minute, but they aren't using a Chinese open source model under the hood. They're using Claude Sonnet 3.7 from what was discovered. So they have computer use. They have some, like, their own file and retrieval. It's just web search really is the only thing new in terms of the tools here, really.
Yeah, I think what's happened is when you look at this OpenAI announcement, and even it's similar over at Google, is they've just had time now as developers on their side of the fence to actually formalize all of the things that they've sort of had in experimental models, different APIs, different feature flags you could activate to enable special options. Now we're at the point where these are full-fledged parts of their API that you can trust and use, and they're documented and all that sort of stuff. So it's a big advancement, and really we're yet to see, like us personally, are yet to see the benefits of natively using those things and seeing, is it really better or not? But I'll be curious to see, and I think it's a very good move for OpenAI. We talked a couple of months ago about how they were a little bit scatterbrained in terms of their focus on this flashy consumer presentation sort of around Christmas time. And we're like, but really isn't the long-term play to just be the thing that be the platform that everyone's building their stuff on? That seems like what they're best at. And this is a major move back in that direction.
If you put me in charge of OpenAI right now and said you can do anything you want, what would you do? I would seriously go hard being, and I know people probably laugh at this, but I would go as hard as I could at being the app store for AI. Like, I would literally copy the sort of Salesforce app exchange model or like iOS apps and let independent developers list in the store, handle authentication. I would handle payments for them, and I would allow them to submit their web apps, their agents, like whatever they've built, as long as they're using some of the OpenAI APIs, including like whatever auth system is needed. And then I would let people browse solutions. So if you're a lawyer, you would go to like the legal section and you could go through and compare and look at reviews on different apps or agents for legal and health and like all these other categories. And then I would seriously of the top 10 apps or the top 5 apps, I would start an investment fund and I would invest in those companies. I would just invest in the top 5 in each category so that you have this ability to have these independent teams specializing on certain agents or certain applications without you having to go boil the ocean. Because I think the problem right now with ChatGPT being attacked from like every angle is that they are forced to go and build like a solution to something, and then they have to abandon it and then focus their attention on something else. And I think we've sort of seen that, like the fact that Google released the native image creation and editing first, when that was demoed long ago in GPT 4.0, like Omni. Remember Omni? But we never got any of the omniness of it. We just
yeah,
where's the Omni?
Yeah, the vision, but none of the output.
Yeah,
That's
they just
right.
didn't execute. And I think that had they been focused and were able to execute and release these APIs and had this other cash cow, which is sort of controlling the AI app ecosystem, because I do think like there's been this explosion around it, right? They could easily charge like a 10% OpenAI tax, as well as getting the tax, I guess, or not tax, but API use. They could make an absolute fortune. Keep the consumer business with ChatGPT, sure, but I think that this is where I would focus, because it seems like whoever wins this agents SDK and everyone starts building their agents on, and they just make it super easy and then super easy to deploy them, charge for them, invent these new ways to charge for agents. Like we saw during the week, as soon as this was announced, and I've lost the link, of course, but no, I haven't. Yes, I have. So as soon as this was announced, Stripe announced that they're supporting this agents SDK, and they have all these charge models for agents. So you can easily implement agent-based billing where you can charge per outcome. Now, why can't OpenAI partner with Stripe and just offer this natively to some sort of like AI agent SDK and platform? To me, that is definitely the play here. Otherwise, I think like, what's the moat? Like eventually Google, Grok, like all these others are just surrounding them and chipping away at it. Whereas if you've got the developers and the ecosystem and the agent platform of the future, like you're untouchable. You're the next sort of Apple.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way, because just working with the APIs, you see such similarities with them in terms of the things they support and what they have. And so really, like, looking at from the dev side, there isn't a big difference there. They all, like, Google has grounded web search, like they have memory, like they have things that that the others have as well. So yeah, you really need the ecosystem side of things to be able to dominate. I think they probably had the right idea with GPTs. It just was really poorly executed. It was sort of like these very thin wrappers around their base model without much of the stuff you're talking about, like handling payments, handling auth, handling the things that are hard when you build a web app. I mean, we know it ourselves. Like, a lot of the work that goes into maintaining a modern AI platform is not the AI stuff. Like, it's all the stuff that surrounds it that takes the time, because you need to be secure and you need to have the settings and you need to have things that people expect in a modern web app. And if someone provided all of that and people are just doing what's unique to individual industries, then there's a lot to be said for getting to market faster by doing that for people, and they're willing to pay the tax to do it.
But I think this is the thing, right? There's two strategies here. One is like you take the harder road, which is force everyone to build with your UI components and like on your platform and all that nonsense, which I surely people aren't stupid enough to do anymore, because you don't have a business really. But I think I would just embrace the fact that these people are going to experiment with new interfaces, new ideas, like all this stuff, and say like, you don't have to build with our UI kit or whatever. It's just like, we're just going to put you in a store as a partner.
Yes, I see.
Have shared auth, so people can click a button, sign up, and get it billed back to their master OpenAI account, and it uses their API credits or whatever. So it's just centralized billing.
Yes, I see. Yeah.
And then they can take a clip on it. To me, that just seems like a no-brainer. I'm shocked why. Maybe they are in the background doing that now, but I think it would be a misstep to not go after that market, because I just don't see where else you go here without just getting your income slowly eroded from these other vendors.
Absolutely, especially when the other models are really hitting hard in terms of their abilities and things like that. Like you can still deliver the same experience on other models just as well. There's no particular reason right now to directly use OpenAI's models.
So here's a cool video they put together as a demo of agents, right? And I'll slow it down. So it says, welcome back, Romain. Where do you want to go? And it's this like demo interface of what you could build with the agents SDK. And he says, plan a trip to Scotland in May. And then
it's always trip planning.
It's always
a
trip.
God.
Anyway, it says looking for flights, and it's slowly building the map. It's a very cool visualized interface. And on the right, they show what's happening in the platform with this sort of trace capability they have in the dashboard with the agents SDK, which I think is really cool. So it's showing like it's got a triage agent who figures out sort of the plan, and this would be like a to-do list for the overall agentic application. So it might be like, okay, we got to book a ticket first. So you can see in the UI it says handoff to the ticket agent. So it's you've got the triage agent who's the specialist at triaging their request. It hands over to the ticket agent. The ticket agent calls the Kayak API and gets some responses, and then shows that in the UI. Then it hands over to the planning agent who does a web search, and it's trying to figure it out, and it's showing a map while it does this web search. Then it hands off to the hotel agent, and the hotel agent is using computer use. So we first call the API, and then we use computer use to actually go through and book it in this case. And then it hands over to the report agent, who I guess prepares like a summary of it. And then it hands to the payment agent who makes the payment, and it's done. It's fully booked. So I think that's a really great demonstration from them of how it all works. So because of the limitations in context, and you want these specialized, almost like we've talked about it before, like AI function calling, really, that's all it is. The agents are just functions essentially. But they have, where the agency comes in is that initial planning step of figuring out like, what am I going to do? And then if something goes right or wrong along the way with that plan, it knows which agent to call in order to, steer the ship back on path. So this is increasingly, I think, this year, the level of applications we're seeing, and like what people actually mean by agentic is that the model's able to make its own plan and then go and execute that plan, and sort of, if things go wrong along the way, self-correct and self-heal and try and get it to an outcome without constantly hitting the user for help.
Yeah, and I think this bleeds nicely into the MCP stuff, because obviously that's why there is such a rise of the concept of an MCP server, where instead of the agent having to figure out everything for itself, it's able to hit up a service and go, well, what tools do I have at my disposal that I can use here, and have a well-mapped interface that explains exactly how to use those tools. So systems it's never used before, it's able to navigate perfectly without having to use trial and error to sort it out. So in the case you've just given with the travel booking one, it may discover a payments MCP that allows it to execute the payments, or a travel search one that gives it the tools it needs to actually plan out the flights and cars and whatever it needs to do. And so that's why I think that the corresponding side to the agents is going to be the MCP stuff, because it just means that you've got these really packaged tools that are going to make it easier for the agents to get by in the world.
Yeah, so originally, to take us back a little bit with ChatGPT, they had like function calling, which is very similar to the Model Context Protocol. And that was something that became like an early feature of ChatGPT, and then they sort of just like muted it in the product. But essentially what it means is the LLM itself can basically call off, a good example would be the Model Context Protocol server for Stripe. It can call off and say, hey, I need to charge this user, right? And then take the payment. That's sort of the concept.
Yeah, and I think the main thing that's different about the MCP to regular tool calling is discoverability. So I hit up Stripe And I'm like, well, what can I do? Like, what abilities do I have? And it gives the definition for the tool calling. So it might be charge customer, list invoices, whatever those functions might be, along with the definitions. And so then my agent can go, all right, to accomplish my task, I'm going to use this combination of the functions to be able to do that, rather than me in my application having to define every single function for Stripe. And I think there's a lot of advantages to that. Firstly, service providers can provide a new style of interface to AI agents, which I think will be increasingly important. And I think, secondly, it means that then you can restrict your agents to what they have access to. So it's like, if you have a dedicated agent that you want to stick to a particular area, just give it access to MCP servers that it needs to do to get the job, and not confuse it with all of these other tools and things that it doesn't need. And I really feel like that discoverability would be interesting. Like, one idea I was thinking about was the idea of like a dynamic MCP server. So think about, like, you're in a game and you have certain abilities at certain times. Like, the actual MCP server could be returning different sets of tools based on the state of the game. So it's like, I don't have the ability to climb a ladder right now because I'm not standing near a ladder. But when I do have that ability, that function appears in the MCP server for me to be able to do. Now, I'm not suggesting this would be best used for game programming, but just think of that concept, the idea that an external supervisory party, like another agent, for example, can be giving different options and abilities to different agents at different times based on a system. Like, that could be really exciting. Like, it doesn't need to be like a static, it doesn't need to be just like another API and another interface to another API. It could actually be something that becomes alive and dynamic, where the agent can actually know its abilities at any given time.
But it seems like two very different approaches, right? So you've got the OpenAI Agents SDK, where I'm expected to, in my code, define a series of agents and their functions, right? So I'm saying I've got my like approval agent, I've got my triage agent, I've got my payment agent, and you're being very specific about like what params that agent, like what things it can do, what functions it can call. And so you're controlling that a lot more. And then, as we predicted quite a while ago, you've got the orchestrator that's basically calling the right agent at the right time based on the plan or the problem in the plan. And so that's one way, right? But then the other way, or the Model Context Protocol MCP approach, in a way, like you could clone this exact same approach and just define the Model Context protocols you want to call for each of these agents as well, right? Like, that's possible. But there's another way, which is just let the model come up with a plan, give it a huge directory, and then it's more universal, right? Like, it could, in theory, do a lot more.
That's right. And I think it's a little bit scary because things then are sort of less reproducible, right? So it's like, if I've got a process in my business, I don't want the agent just making it up on the fly each time what it does in that process. However, if there is some sort of dynamicism to the situation where it needs to be making decisions about what to do and iterating until it gets a job done, then I would prefer it to know, here's all the different stuff you can do. You figure out how to go from here, rather than it being this prescriptive thing where it's like, okay, here's the procedure, we call this agent, we wait for the response, once that agent's done, we call this agent and do that response. It doesn't seem like that's the future of intelligent. And in particular, when the supervisory agents, as they become smarter with better models, they're going to make better use of the existing tools. You don't have to keep re-implementing the tools all the time. They're going to stay the same. The agents get smarter and they can make better use of it. So you sort of miss that glue code in an application that strings everything together, and you're just relying on the agent to figure it out based on the tools it has available. It's a very exciting way of working, really, especially when the idea that at some point you can have non-technical users fabricating these tools. So I might be a non-technical person, but I can describe to an agent well enough how to build tools that I can put in my MCP server that I can then make available to my agent. So I can envisage a future where you've got someone putting together the pieces of solving a problem and then handing it off to an agent to actually go ahead and solve the problem. And then at some point, inevitably close to the sort of singularity, the agents themselves are inventing the tools and the agents and so on.
Yeah, and I think that if you actually go through some of the documentation examples like I did, when you look at handoffs, right? So you've got like, in this case, a booking agent, a refund agent, going back to that original example. And then you're essentially defining, say, the triage agent with instructions, help the user with their questions. If they ask about a booking, hand off to the booking agent. So you're being very descriptive of when to do the handoff in the instructions. And then you define the handoff. So like booking agent, refund agent. So right now, the concept, I think what the expectation of, say, the consumer is with an agent is like this sentient AI making the decisions just off the cuff. But what's really going on behind the scenes is the developer's still defining very heavily like the process of the chatbot. Like, let's get real here. They're defining the process of a chatbot. It's just very, very dynamic planning and dynamic.
Yeah, and they're different use cases too. Like, one of the things I've always disliked about tool calling is that it loves to call the tools. So it's like, if it has the ability to like search the web, I don't want to risk typing something that's going to cause it to search when I don't want that. And likewise, sometimes you expect it to say search the web, but then it doesn't. And I think that's been the frustrating thing with tool calling. Those more explicit agents that have well-defined parameters around what their scope is, what their training is, their knowledge, and then here's the scenarios in which you move to the next step or abort or whatever it is. That's appealing because it avoids the problem I'm talking about. Whereas your sort of more general problem solving agent with the MCP stuff is also appealing because it's more like, well, I can just throw a problem at it. It's smart enough to know when it needs more info and smart enough to know when it can cobble together a plan. And I don't have to worry so much about being so explicit in terms of setting that up. So I can see advantages in both, but when you say universal agent that can just do whatever, I'd be stressed out using that on a day-to-day basis because I don't want it to do all this work if it isn't needed.
I think also the problem right now, right, is the context drift and context limitations. So if an agent's plodding along, and this is why you see agentic solutions like Devon and Manus and Claude Code, they'll create like basically a to-do list file when you ask it to go off and do something, and it'll create a plan. And people have been doing this with models for quite a long time. This is not that new. The models have just improved. So you create basically a to-do list, and then sequentially it'll go through the to-do list and then hand off when it needs to the appropriate context, so you don't fill the context over time. So it can basically clear it out. And then when it gets to a certain size, it's basically going to like compact, which is what Claude Code does, compact that context down so it can keep going without sort of, running out of the context, but trying to stay on task. And so I think splitting it up into all these smaller specialist pieces helps sort of work with the constraints around context with the models right now.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And it would be like, if you're trying to get an application out now, it probably is the right way to do it right now. You wouldn't just put all the tools together and just hope that it does the right thing. I mean, we've seen that with computer use, right? Like, we have got some great examples where the computer use works flawlessly. Like, you can get it to do your security training with no previous knowledge. You literally just log it in and say, go do the training, and it's able to do that. But for every example where it works great, there's like 100 where one little thing trips it up and then it doesn't work. And no one really wants a system like that in their business or life, because you can't babysit this thing all day. So I really feel like the MCP tool calling gets you a step closer to that, including in terms of computer use, but it's not there yet. So I think both approaches are still needed.
I think too, when enterprises are thinking about this right now, there's two categories I would break agents into right now. There's sort of like hard, let's call them hard-coded agents. So if you're a large enterprise like a health fund and you want to have a support chat running on your site, right? And you're like, I'm going to manually code this now because I've got all the tools available. There's a lot of open source UIs available. So our internal team's going to work on this, sort of hard-coded exactly what we want with these series of agents. it seems like the agents SDK from OpenAI is like really appropriate to use there. Although you could just, hard code it yourself in that case. But I think there's another piece to it, which is people's day-to-day productivity, right? Where they don't want to like hard code one of these agents. It's sort of back to this like custom GPT style thing where they want to go into an interface and say, I need computer use, I need some authenticated states, I need web search, whatever sort of MCPs call it, or tool calling, or whatever we're going to call it here. Basically tools. I need these tools. Here's some examples of how I do this particular task. Can you go and create an agent? So it's like an agent that creates agents that will help me in my day-to-day complete this task. So whenever it comes up, I can send my assistant off and say, you go do that task. I don't want to do it. And that reliably it will get done how you do it. So if that's like logging in to some sort of like custom banking system or desktop software and entering some values in, call it, reliably this thing will just go off, do that for you. And that's just a part of your sort of like day-to-day of 10xing yourself. Sorry.
Yeah,
I can't help but
I get up and have an ice bath at 4 a.m. and then I meditate for 2 to 3 hours each morning.
Yeah, and then I send my agents off with my assistant who keeps me on task. Anyway, but I shouldn't mock this because it's sort of our life. But but anyway, so I think there's definitely two separate categories here. One is like these specialist agents that businesses will either like buy or make themselves. The other is ones where there's sort of like, I wouldn't call them throwaway, but it's like mapping out your own like repetitive tasks in your own day-to-day that you want to solve and then go and build solutions for them that you also deem reliable. Like it's not going to get you fired because you're doing something mental.
Yeah, you're not just like, here's unrestricted access to my computer with everything logged in. Go nuts.
Yeah, so that brings me over to Manus. Manus. Is it Manus or Manus? I'm sure they pronounce it Manus. I've heard Manus, I've heard Manus, who cares? So this apparently caught the world by surprise.
Anus.
Yeah, literally a lot of people have pointed that out. Why are all the logos like it?
Oh, I thought I was clever.
No, it's already been done. The internet beat you to it. So quite a compelling, interesting product, and definitely close to our hearts. So what first happened, and I would say this is like, first of all, insanely good viral marketing. So this was all over X, then it made CNBC, and it plays into this weird alleged arms race between China and the US. What I found hilarious about the mainstream commentators on this is they're like, America's doomed, like America's stuffed. And it's like, yeah, but the Chinese threat, first of all, is based in Singapore. And second of all, is using Claude Sonnet 3.7 and an open source library called Browser Use. So I think America's fine. So let's get that out of the way first. So what got everyone excited about this? Well, unlike Devon and Claude Code and other agentic experiences we've seen so far, is this was what I think everyone envisaged OpenAI would release as part of ChatGPT when they brought out Operator, which essentially spins up a virtual machine and it creates a folder for every chat interaction you have with it. And in that folder, it puts in a to-do list. And the to-do list is the plan for Manus to complete that particular task. And then it basically goes and it does use code to build out whatever it needs to build to get your task done. And that could be like, go off and do some research on something and output an Excel spreadsheet, which is, again, what a couple of weeks ago I said I wanted deep research to do by ChatGPT. So it can go off, it searches the web using browser use, it evaluates its sources using its checklist, it compiles that information, and then it can do things like produce a document or publish it on a website. Really anything you can do with a computer, because it can access the code and the terminal and stuff like that. I would say the biggest innovation here, or what is the most interesting, is, first of all, I think the user interface they came up with is great, especially in this phase where you're just like unsure what these universal agents will do. Like it can go and do some crazy stuff, and you want to be able to watch it, right? So I think that's really cool. They have a really neat replay feature as well. And then I think the other super cool thing is they've just combined a bunch of the technologies, and we've been saying it on this show for a while. Is like all the pieces are there to build something like this. Someone just needs to like bring them all together. And I think they've done a pretty good job by the looks of it. I haven't used it yet. We haven't got access, but when we do, we might report back in on it if it's still even noteworthy at the time. I will say this about it though. I'm not terribly sure that it can do anything you can't do on your own in Claude or ChatGPT or even SimTheory with a multi-shot approach, right? So like a lot of the examples they gave was like, taking a PDF and then deploying a website, which is like a tutorial or learning module based on the information in that PDF. They had it like researching stocks, which you can kind of instantly do on Perplexity. And so a lot of the, like, I'm not trying to take anything away from it. I think it's really clever what they've done. I think the problem with a lot of these agents right now is like, is the output you get actually worth the time writing the prompt and waiting for it to do its thing versus just a couple of shots with your assistant throughout the day? I'm still a bit perplexed on whether you're getting the benefit. And a lot of the examples they give, like planning a trip to Japan in April, like I was seeing examples online, and you can watch some of their replays in this library here, and you replay it, and then you just do a one shot into like a chat GPT or whatever, and you get the same answer. It's just like a lot more work with the model sort of like, going off and doing a bunch of stuff. So I guess this is the challenge we face really as developers of building these agents out, is like, what are the useful outputs that are worthy of your time to go and engage one of these agents? And I just right now don't feel like the future of this is going to some universal agent. I think OpenAI's kind of got it right with this SDK about building very specialist tools right now instead of the universal agent. And I think it's why you've seen like Windsurf and Cursor agents be very successful, because they're very specialist in what they're good at. They know what they're good at. They know what they are not so good at. And
I guess it's similar to like hiring someone for a job. You don't just hire like a general person and then go, hey, can you now cut this person's hair? You hire a hairdresser. Like they're specialists in things for a reason, because they're better at doing that. Like it kind of makes sense that even if you did have a universal agent that could do things, you'd still want one that has studied the examples and has some specialized knowledge around the task it's trying to accomplish, right?
yeah, and I also think like when Sam Altman talks about, I'm going to spin up a million junior devs, which we always joke about, like you don't want a million generalist devs in that case. You would want probably like to build a small team of
you just
specialists,
want one
right?
super god. Yeah.
Like one super god coder that can just and like clone that super. I mean, maybe you want some concurrency, but anyway, I just don't know if the universal agent idea is going to take off, because you can even see it in the marketing materials and no one actually knows what to ask the thing to do. I think that's one of the challenges is we joke about it all the time, but if I gave you an AGI API literally right now, it's like, what would you do? And I think that's one of the challenges, right? It's about training. It's about use cases. It's about figuring out like, what are the parts of my day, or what are the things that I do in my life that this is actually effective at helping me at, and where is it beneficial? And
I really like your concept of setting it up to rehearse tasks, like step it through. This is how you accomplish this task. Here's what the screen should look like. Here's the screenshots, and have this approach where you essentially create a new tool by demonstration. I think really that's probably a logical next point for these generalist machine operators, where it's like, okay, I have computer use, I can log into everything for it, but here is a demonstration of how to go and check the email for any urgent tasks and notify my boss if there's something urgent. Here's how to go in and reconcile the invoices for the day. So you log into the bank account, you check for payments that have come through, you log into the accounting system, you mark them as paid if they match.
Yeah, I think,
Here's how to print out the order fulfillment sheets or something like that. So everyday business tasks that currently people are doing somewhat manually can be demonstrated to the agent, and then it can then have that ability from then on.
yeah, to me, that's the next step. Like maybe eventually you get some like super agent out of this, but I think right now where the technology's at, for people that are in the enterprise or in education or wherever, demonstrating here's how I do a very repetitive task that makes my life miserable. You do it. Like, you do it from now on, and I'll just tell you when I need to do it. Or having another agent that's like, okay, I'm looping on this inbox. I've found this email. This email is asking this person to do this dumb task they hate. I'm going to call up the dumb task agent that does it. And then that actually improves your workflow and productivity. And I guess what I'm saying is, for developers looking for use cases or people thinking about how can I go and get in on this and benefit from these SDKs and go out and build these agents, I do feel like it's starting from a very specific niche problem and going, okay, this is a problem people have in this job. They're doing it over and over again. And I mean, none of this is new, but it's just really understanding like what's the pain point. And I feel like the labs and everyone with their releases just does such a bad job. Like, here's how to plan a trip to Mexico again, or here's how to go buy a dress I like. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to give an example that is close to us, like imagine something like adding Imogen 3 to Sim Theory, right? Like there's a definite process there. You need to make sure you have access to it in the API. You need to find the API documents. You need to write a test script and test that you have access to it. Then you need to locate the point in the code where you want to insert it. Then you need to insert the code. Then you need to test it. Now, yes, the AI can write the code that goes in there, but there's a lot of other steps I said there that aren't about the actual code writing. And I feel like this is where the agents need to get to the next level now. Like if you really want to be like a junior dev, it needs to be able to do all of those steps, not just the code bit.
Yeah, the breakthrough I think recently with like a Manus or Claude Code is just being able to create a folder and use the file system to create better file structures, and then having better file tree search, locating the chunk of context it needs much better, and being able to name those files and have a project structure every time it tries to do a task. And that way you do have like better consistency, because as the developer, you somewhat know like the agent's going to control this structure every time. And so there's just that consistency, especially when you're trying to debug. Is a really interesting approach. It's funny how though everything's coming back to the root of the computer, like actually using the terminal and just barking orders. And then when it is absolutely necessary, going and picking up like a browser use or a computer use or whatever.
Yeah, I guess it's just a less efficient interface, right? Like clicking around and working with other people's interfaces when you can just go direct to the source.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I hear like a leaf blower or a vacuum or something in the background with you. So I think we'll wrap it up there because people are probably like, what is going on? But yeah, so any final thoughts for the week? Obviously, we're going to keep having fun with our Gemini Flash 2 experimental hilarities. I'm excited on the Discord to actually go and share some of my wild creations with this thing. Yes, I use wild.
That's one thing I'm excited about. The other one is I want to try OpenAI's computer use with our Sim Theory computer use and see, is it better? Can it get further and deeper into tasks? Like, what are the advantages? And then probably my other thought is, I think we're starting to see some real maturity from the API providers when it comes to the AI stuff. And I really want to make sure that we personally explore their full offerings, because it's no longer appropriate to just talk about them at the model level. It's about the combination of the tools they're providing and working with them all together to see what's possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of maturity there, as we've seen from these APIs and SDKs evolving. I also think the agent landscape is evolving very rapidly now. Like, people are starting to open their eyes and say, okay, well, here's how to structure an agent. Here's how to build an agent. Here are the things that an agent could actually help me with versus what I sort of fantasized about maybe a year ago. And so I think as people get more and more grounded in reality with agents, they're by the end of this year, I think I predict people will just consistently be relying on agents to go off and do things for them or parts of their job that they mightn't really like today. I don't see it as some existential threat or like, everyone's cooked. I just think that it's going to be a really pleasurable experience by the end of the year where you will feel, if you adopt these technologies, that you are empowered and you are more productive and you do work faster and you do have more efficient team members. That's my opinion of all this. This is where I think we're starting to see it go. And I think things like Manus, Claude Code, all the things we're seeing, this new SDK, it's just a preview. It's a preview of the future, and everyone's got to keep building and get this stuff into people's hands where it's really beneficial.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that.
All right, I've ranted way too much on this episode. Thank you for listening to our rants. If you've made it this far, we appreciate it. If you want to support the show and check out Gemini 2 Flash and some other things we've quietly leaked into Sim Theory, which we haven't actually announced yet, you can go to simtheory.ai. We also release family plans. So if you're looking to combine an account and have 6 seats for your family and pay one single ridiculously low price, you now can on simtheory.ai. So we are losing a lot of money on this subscription. We want to support families. We're from a family of 6, so we made the family seats 6, so you can have up to 6, which I thought was just a nod, because I think back in the day, if this was out and as a family we wanted to use it, like, it would be very expensive to have 6 subscriptions. So now you can just have one subscription and have 6 people in the subscription.
And I think the other thing worth noting on the family plan is you get all the extra options like theming and control over permissions and like all the cool stuff like model forking that's available on the workspaces plan. So it's more than just the seats as well.
Yeah, brought to you by NordVPN. All right.
Yeah, those guys are great.
All right. If you like this show, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Even if you listen on the Apple Podcasts or the Spotify, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I will get a mohawk blonde. I will dye my hair blonde, just like the AI image that you've maybe seen, and I will look like an idiot. People will question my sanity in my life. But
you got to do it. You got to do it for the 100th episode. I'm going to start recruiting singers soon to get your AI song sung by a nice female singer.
We've got to set the bar higher. Like, I'm not ruining my hair, my precious hair, for the 100th episode. That's creeping up real fast. So it's got to be the 10,000 YouTube subs.
All right.
And I'm going to do a really lame subscriber special episode where it's just like me awkwardly talking into my phone camera.
Okay.
All right. I'll live stream at the hairdresser or barber or whatever you call them, getting the bleach blonde hair as well. So there's my bet. All right. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.